On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, another ship loses power. Hey, what's going on with shipping? Sal Mercogliano here. So there are some days I feel like I am just the bearer of bad news. I mean, I'm really not always coming to you with very positive stories, but that's going to be different today. But over the past couple of weeks, months, and quite a while, there's been a lot of bad things happening in ocean shipping just recently. We had the situation down in Fremantle, Australia, where the sailing ship Lewin was hit by an inbound container ship. We, of course, have the motor vessel Dolly in Baltimore and that entire story. We have another tragic story in the United States, this time of a towboat being run down in Houston. But then we do have some great stories, like the story out of Charleston, where a pilot on board was able to navigate MSC Michigan 7 out of the channel and out into deep water without hitting anything. We have the same situation with the APL Qingdao, where that ship didn't have too much power but lost propulsion. They were able to get that ship out to the anchorage. And then we have the harrowing story that actually took place before I started my channel, but we saw the NTSB report come out concerning the motor vessel Golden Ray. And in each of those situations, we had the roles of a ship's pilot. Now, we talk a lot about ship's pilots on here, and ship's pilots are experts in navigating specific areas. The analogy I like to use is they're almost like a caddy for a golfer. They don't take the responsibility away from the captain of the vessel, but they provide expertise, give them the lay of the land, and at times they will assume control of the vessel. However, ultimate responsibility lies with the ship's master. But down in Tampa this past week, we saw an incident take place where the ship's pilot played an important role.
And honestly, most days people don't notice the pilots. You might not know that we're on board, might not even know the profession exists.
Until a routine job out on the water becomes an emergency situation.
I started on the pilot boat and I boarded the Tyndall. I get on board the ship, I climb a pilot ladder up the side of the ship.
Ken Sears, a seasoned Tampa Bay harbor pilot, was directing the nearly 1,000-foot cargo ship on the last leg of its journey into Port Tampa Bay Thursday morning. The ship, carrying almost 100,000 tons of cargo, was only about 200 feet from docking.
I ordered the engine astern, start reversing, essentially put the brakes on, for lack of a better term. And when I asked for that, the engine did not start going in reverse.
So that report by Fox News down in Tampa, and we're going to go back to that in a minute, discusses the arrival of the motor vessel Tyndall. This is a vessel that is chartered to Maersk Lines and was sailing from Mobile, Alabama over to Tampa, making its arrival in the port. And the ship's pilot, Ken Sears, a graduate of the State University of New York Maritime College, the finest maritime academy in the world, was on board to deal with the issue of a loss of propulsion just as the vessel was coming into dock. This story over at Maritime Executive discusses the situation. Boxship malfunction causes brief scare in Tampa Bay. Want to come down here to the heart of the story. Described as quick thinking, Sears worked to change the angle of the vessel while calling for assistance from two nearby tugs. He said they were able to change the angle and ultimately get the speed under control, although the vessel went several hundred feet past its berth. Sears believed the engine did not start going in reverse when called for during navigation maneuvers. All right, let's head over to marine traffic and do my best Juan Brown impersonation and talk about what exactly happened this day. So Tyndall, a container ship built in 2014, 10 years old, flagged in Liberia, very common. One of the biggest registries in the world is the Liberian registry, carrying capacity of 8,600 TEUs. TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. Most containers you see on ships are 40-footers. Those are FEUs, so 2 TEUs equal 1 FEU. Has a current draft of 10.3 meters, an overall length of 300 meters, and a width of 48 meters. Went over to Equus, the ship database, to see inspections on the vessel. The ship has been flagged for several issues in the past, but nothing stood out for me as I went through this. Last time they had an issue was back in China when they underwent an inspection back in July of 2024. Those inspections were very minor. Even going back further years, the last time the U.S. inspected it was in December 30th over in Houston, Texas, and prior to that there was an expanded examination back in August in Mobile, Alabama. So really no red flags coming out with this vessel. This is the route as published by Maersk. Even though the ship does not adorn the Maersk colors, the ship is under charter to Maersk and is operating on their route. The ship had sailed from Mobile, Alabama on 1 September. It had arrived off Tampa on the 3rd, was at anchor for 2 days, and then came in on the morning of 5 September. The ship has since left on 7 September, now heading down to Puerto Cortes, then to Manzanillo, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, in Mexico, and then heading through the Panama Canal on 12 September and heading over to East Asia with ports in Xiamen, Yantian, and Busan. It's running from East Asia through the Panama Canal and back over to the United States. It is not a massive container ship like we see with 18,000 TEU, or even the largest one that go through the Panama Canal, which is around 17,000 TEU. This is a good mid-sized container ship, but it's very large for the port of Tampa. Let's head over to marine traffic and take a look at what happened that day. Here's the track for Tyndall as it makes its arrival into the port of Tampa. It's a long sea detail from the anchorage all the way into port is a good distance. Takes several hours to go ahead and make it. You're talking about probably over 20 miles coming in here, 20 to 30 mile sea distance. So it's a good voyage. Ship has to navigate a pretty long, lengthy, narrow channel, including passing here under the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. If that name is familiar to you, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge was the bridge hit in 1980 that collapsed that everybody was referencing when the Dolly hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge in 2024. So it has to pass under that same bridge. Now it's a much different bridge. Bridge has been expanded, enlarged, so no issues with that. So here's Tyndall at anchor in the western Tampa Fairway anchorage. We're going to throw ahead and throw some issues on here. We're going to put nearby vessels and speed on here. So you can see some vessels out here in the anchorage ready to come in. Time here is 0800 UTC time, 5 September. So you need to adjust time period, and here's Tyndall getting underway. About 7 knots, 5, 6, 7 knots coming out. Here is the entrance to the Tampa Bay channel. That's the lighted buoy that brings you into the main channel here. And then you'll see Tyndall come wide of the channel and make its approach. It slows down. I'm going to assume that Tyndall picked up its pilot in and around here. I've run this track a couple of times through marine traffic, and I haven't seen the pilot boat come out. I know there's a pilot on board, just we're not seeing the pilot boat come out here. Could have been the AIS was off on the pilot boat for some reason, don't know. But the ship is going to make its approach into the channel. Very clear channel. This is early morning, obviously. So when pilots are navigating on board a ship, along with the ship's master and the deck crew who's up on the bridge, they will have not just radar, but they got the visual observation through the windows. Those big windows are the best way to do it. You've got lighted buoys like a runway tracking you in. In the United States and in the classification society, it's red on right returning, so the red buoys will be on your right. Believe it or not, there are 2 systems of buoys in the world, and they're completely opposite. That's right. Half the world does red on right returning. The other half does red on left when returning. Don't ask me. I don't know. It's kind of like driving on the left or right side, depending on what country you are in the world. Buoys are the same way. And there have been accidents because people don't realize what buoy system they're under, but not an issue here. So here's Tyndall making its approach in, coming in 10 knots through the area. You'll see the Dole Aztec right behind it coming in. So you have 2 ships coming in at the same time, not unusual. The ship is tracking as it comes in. The track line seems to be perfect coming in. Outbound ship, the OOCL Utah. So you had a little bit of a meeting situation there. No problems. Here they are coming past the Tampa Bridge. There's the Skyway Bridge. And the ship is proceeding up. The depth in meters here. Sorry, this is what marine traffic does. They like to have their depth in meters here. So here's the ship. Keep maneuvering up here. No issues at all. Dead smack right in the middle of the channel. Just absolutely pinging through the buoys. You've got a right turn coming up here to head into Tampa. See them hugging the right side of that channel. Very typical for what you'll see. Tyndall coming up. Some tugs coming down, making the approach now toward the port of Tampa. And I'm going to pause it right here for a second. And we're going to zoom in here for just a minute. So 2 tugs coming in here. You see the Aura coming on the stern of the vessel. Again, very typical. You want a tug to kind of grab you at the stern. Tugs will come alongside. You'll have a heaving line thrown up. or thrown down, I should say, from the vessel. The vessel will throw a heaving line down, a small little line with a big monkey fist on it, so you get some weight. Throw it to the tug. They'll pull that heaving line in. They'll get a big, huge mooring line on it. They'll attach the mooring line. Aura will be on the stern, riding the stern of the vessel, and that's to check speed and also to provide pull to help navigate. Up here is the tug Trinity. Trinity, another tug, is going to come up here alongside. We're going to slow this down just a little bit here and go ahead and let it play. See Trinity coming up here on the side, right along the starboard side of the vessel. Reason on the starboard side, they're going to come port side 2 when it comes to the berth here. So everything seems to be proceeding very normally here. Ship is making the turn, slowing down, coming down 5 knots, making your turn, very tight channel coming in here, down to 3.9 knots, 4 knots coming in here, down to 3 knots, making its approach. It's going to come right here up against the berth. What happens here, according to the pilot, is that he's going to put the engines astern. Now, understand something about the mechanics of engines on large vessels. These are slow-speed diesel engines. So you can't think about the diesel engine that's in your truck or anything like that. This is a massive diesel engine. I mean, the pistons are big enough you can stand in them. But the big thing about a slow-speed diesel engine is it makes very slow revolutions per minute. Basically, it is so slow that there is no what's called reduction gear. In other words, there's no gear system. If you've ever driven an old automatic, not an automatic, but a standard drive, you know you have to shift your gears. Your automatic does it for you automatically. It's how your engine produces more and more speed by going through a series of gear reductions to get that power translated to more revolutions per minute of your tire. Well, on a slow-speed diesel engine, the engine is directly connected to the propeller. And if you want to go in reverse, you actually have to stop the diesel engine and go in reverse with the diesel engine because it's directly connected. And many of the older diesel, and this ship is 14 years old, so we're going to assume that it probably has a direct drive diesel engine. You've got to get that engine to stop and then go into reverse. And this is where they lose power. And understand, power on the ship is the key thing. While you have Tugs, he only has 2 on him. It is the ship's propulsion system that's going to give you the most control. And when he loses power going forward, that means he's got to call on his Tugs to kind of rein him in to make sure that the ship does not go ahead here. Notice again, here's the ship coming in. Here's the berth. What he doesn't want to do is come too far ahead here. There's a ship right here, the Juice Express. He doesn't want to continue his forward motion into them. There are cranes right here. He has a big basin he can go into, but what he wants to do is get the ship up against the berth. Let's go over to that Fox News report.
I ordered the engine astern, start reversing, essentially put the brakes on, for lack of a better term. And when I asked for that, the engine did not start going in reverse.
Sears says they lost the engine. He directed the 2 tugboats to help slow the ship down without the engine as quickly as possible.
The tugboat is much less powerful than the ship, so this was going to take a bit longer for the ship to stop.
But Sears had mere seconds to change course as the ship was headed towards another ship and a massive crane.
I was able to eventually get the ship's speed under control and the angle away from the dock to where nothing was in danger. The ship was heading out towards open water.
A near miss from a potential crash.
The people of Hillsborough County and the state of Florida have invested a lot of money in the ports here because it's a big economic engine for us and extremely important.
Other types of malfunctions around the country have caused disastrous consequences. That's where the harbor pilot comes in. In this case, Sears' quick thinking navigated this ship to safety.
And it's only when there's a disaster are we really reminded of what is at stake. And an event like this morning shows that it can happen and still end all right.
So I think Ken Sears is being very humble right there. I think he did a fantastic job. Again, you saw ahead of the vessel, the Juice Express sitting there. You had cranes. He was able to get the vessel turned toward the basin here in case he needed it. Those 2 tugs, Trinity and Aura, were able to kind of wrestle the Tyndall back under control, and he was able to get it up against the berth. It doesn't appear like a big issue on this, I have to tell you, but understand the momentum of a 300-meter vessel, 100,000 tons, is a lot. And if the vessel had proceeded up into the basin further and potentially hit something, it could have been catastrophic for the port of Tampa. And I just want to raise an issue about why we're seeing this. So a lot of people want to go with this idea that there's sabotage out there and that there's a lot of issues behind the surface. That's not it. We are moving more cargo faster and in greater quantities than ever before. The term I use is volume and velocity. A greater volume of cargo at a greater velocity than ever before. We also have the issue of COVID, and I don't want to talk about COVID for what it is, but the impact that the shutdowns and COVID had on the shipping industry. Understand, we rely on about 1.5 million mariners out there to move ocean shipping around. There's 100,000 vessels, over 100 gross tons out there, and these 1.5 million mariners are what the entire world depends on to move our cargo. But COVID upset everything. Because of COVID, crews couldn't get off their vessels and new crews couldn't get to their vessels. And that led to a massive displacement. We estimate we lost about 400,000 mariners out there, including some very well-trained engineers. Engineers, as much as I hate to say this being the deck guy that I am, engineers are essential. You've got to have good engineers on your vessel. And what has happened is we've lost a lot of good engineers. Now, we've got great engineers out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not actually underrating the engineers we have out there, but we've lost a lot of them. And that means that a lot of people are being trained. That means a lot of maintenance may not be done. A lot of things may be slipping through the cracks. And what we're seeing here is ships losing propulsion at key moments. Now, ships lose propulsion all the time. People don't understand it, but it does happen. But when it happens during a maneuver like Tyndall coming into the dock in Tampa, that is critical. That is critical. That is the moment when you don't need to what's called drop the plant, because now all of a sudden you've lost propulsion. Fortunately, the pilot was able to have two tugs on position. The tugs were capable of holding it. He had come in nice and slow. He didn't come in too fast. He had control of the vessel, and I think Ken Sears did a great job. And, you know, one of the things I like to do is highlight that. I think it's a good sign of American maritime professionalism. He was up there on the bridge alongside the ship's master with a helmsman and a mate, and they were able to do it. The engineers down in the engine room were probably able to get engine propulsion back up shortly, but even without that, they were able to use the tugs, come in, and come alongside. Slow is fast. You know, if you do things very meticulously, you take your time, you will do it well. I can't highlight enough about this. There are some great pilots I follow all the time on social media, on a variety of sources, which show you how they do their job. And I think Ken Sears just gave us that lesson. I've tried to highlight pilots as much as I can, and I am glad that the Tampa Bay Pilot Association decided to make Ken and the other pilots in Tampa Bay available to the media to talk about it, because, again, this is a profession that doesn't get enough attention, but they're absolutely essential. Ships are in and out of U.S. ports all the time and around the world, and it's because of pilots like Ken that you have a clear, efficient manner. And let's not forget, even when you have accidents like Dolly in Baltimore or Golden Ray down in Brunswick, and many times it's the pilots that help mitigate those disasters from becoming worse. It was the pilot on Dolly, for example, that sent that warning out, that was able to close traffic on the bridge and prevent the massive loss of life from traffic. Yes, we lost 6 people, which is a tragedy of epic proportions, but it could have been much worse. Same thing with Golden Ray coming out of Brunswick, where the pilot was able to maneuver that vessel out of the channel and prevent the port of Brunswick from being closed, or the South Carolina Charleston pilot that was able to get MSC Michigan 7 down the channel, out of the harbor and out into deep water when the throttle got stuck. These are great stories, and I think we need to talk about them more. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Hit that super thanks button down below. You can contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon, become a monthly or yearly subscriber. Until the next video, this is Sal.